And Bosasa heads to the High Court today to reverse its voluntary liquidation.
Well, in its court papers, Board Chair Johannes Gumede says the board did not read legal papers supplied by consultants properly.
He says the board was in a rush to respond to bank's decision to close the company's accounts.
In the court papers, Bosasa claims liquidators would cause immense harm to the company. Our colleague Govan Whittles is covering that story for us. Just to set the scene for us, he's live at the court. Govan, very good morning. Well, the day has come. Bosasa going in there now to say, no, we made a mistake in applying for liquidation.
Indeed, Bradan, and what's significant here is the date which the bank sent a letter to Bosasa informing them of their intention to close their account, and the date at which Bosasa submitted their application for voluntary liquidation to the Master of the High Court is at least 1 week apart. So that would mean that in the time period when the Bosasa board was receiving legal advice on what to do in response to this letter from the bank, they had taken 1 week and still managed to get it wrong, if we go by what the board chairperson is saying. And then this morning, in an astounding turn of events, they're approaching the High Court to try and have that voluntary liquidation application reversed. Here, it's important to also point out that the Bosasa board, African Global Operations Board, and the liquidators seem to not be talking in the same tone, because we know that the liquidators went to the African Global headquarters, the Bosasa headquarters in Krugersdorp, and they started attaching a lot of items there, started removing computers, started removing some of the hardware as well. But in their first briefing, they said that they were confident that they would be able to handle this voluntary liquidation properly. It seems as if the board and Bosasa owners disagree with them, but one wonders why they didn't opt for business rescue instead of winding the company up, essentially closing the company, because that was one of their options. Well, today we're expected to hear those arguments, particularly on how the board believes the liquidators intend to do irreparable harm to the company through this voluntary liquidation process. I think what's also important to note here, Bradan, is that while the liquidation is underway, the liquidators have the power to call an inquiry and summon the directors of the company, the chairman of the board, to explain how the company got to this position. And the liquidators are empowered to do that through Section 419 of the Companies Act, and it seems as if the Master of the High Court would be adjudicating that specific inquiry, and we could have more details on how Bosasa was run coming out through that inquiry. But of course, if they're successful today in the High Court, that wouldn't happen, and it would be interesting to see how the court approaches the arguments from both the board and the liquidators.
And very quickly for us, Governor, are we expecting to see any of the controversial figures from the company once known as Bosasa during these proceedings today?
We may see them. That would be unlikely at this point. We're likely to only see representatives from the Master of the High Court, the liquidators, and of course the legal team from Bosasa. We haven't seen any of the key role players that were mentioned by Angelo Grizi in the State Capture Commission showing up at any of the events leading up to this liquidation. At the Master of the High Court as well, those papers were just submitted, and then the matter was given over to the liquidators. At this point, the liquidators, because the liquidation application was granted, they are at this point declared the MDs of the company, the managing directors, and because of that they control most of the company. So it will be interesting to see if the owners or perhaps representatives from the board show up at this court hearing to show their seriousness in overturning the application for voluntary liquidation.
Thank you very much, Govan Whittles, there in court ahead of that hearing by